I never imagined that someone could feel their own soul detach from their body while still breathing. But that night, trapped and injured in a basement in Shiraz, I understood that there are pains that have no name and trials that God allows not to destroy us, but to show us what we are truly made of. My name is Nima Rahimi, and this is my story. I grew up in Shiraz, a city where every stone seems to carry centuries of history. Poets like Hafez and Saadi lived here, singing of love and beauty even in difficult times. But for me, Shiraz wasn't poetry. It was the place where I learned too early that seeking the truth could cost everything. My family was Muslim, like all the families I knew. My father worked in a carpet shop near the bazaar, where the smell of black tea mingled with the wool dust. My mother guided us with the tenderness and firmness that only a Persian mother knows how to possess. I was the eldest of 3 siblings. We prayed 5 times a day, fasted during Ramadan, and followed rules that everyone knew, but few questioned. And yet something inside me never found peace. There was a restlessness that woke me in the middle of the night, a question that haunted me. Do I really know God, or am I just repeating empty rituals? I would kneel on the prayer mat, recite the words, but my heart remained cold and distant. Everything changed when I was 23 years old. I was at the market on a day that seemed ordinary, when something extraordinary happened. An elderly man with a gray beard and deep eyes approached me. He spoke softly, urgently, but without fear. "Have you read about Isa al-Machi?" he asked, using the name of Jesus. I said yes, that I knew what the Quran said. Then he took something out of a bag, a small worn book wrapped in a cloth, and disappeared into the crowd before I could ask anything. That night, locked in my room, I finally opened the book. It was the Gospel of John, written in Farsi. I began to read slowly, with curiosity, but soon that curiosity turned into hunger, and then into tears I couldn't hold back. Words seemed to leap from the pages and touch my heart. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I read all night, unable to stop. When I reached chapter 14, something broke inside me. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. These weren't just written words. It was a voice calling me by name, a voice that knew who I truly was, and offered me a whole life to fill the void in my heart. I cried until it hurt, and there, alone in my room, while Shiraz slept, I surrendered my life to Jesus. I asked him to know me and transform me, if he was real, and had given his life for me. There was no thunder, no bright lights, but I felt a peace I had never known, as if I had finally returned home after years of wandering lost in the desert. The path that followed was difficult, painful, and full of secrets. For months, I hid that little book under my mattress and studied in silence, learning to know the one who had changed my life forever. I sought out other believers who, like me, lived in the shadows, an invisible network of people who had found the same truth. And then, on a quiet night, I was finally baptized in a discreet home, barely able to speak to anyone. There were only 10 people present. Each of us knew the risk. In Iran, abandoning Islam is not just a personal choice. It is considered treason. Apostasy can cost blood, imprisonment, or exile. Even so, I couldn't remain silent. Every time I read the scriptures, I felt an urgency burning inside me, like a live ember. Millions of people in my country had never heard the true gospel. Many lived with the same emptiness I felt. How could I remain silent knowing this? I started carefully. Small gatherings in homes, never in the same place twice in a row. We arrived gradually, with intervals of time between each person. We turned off our cell phones, closed the curtains, and covered the windows with blankets. And there, in that humble environment, filled with the aroma of tea and spices, we worshipped the living God. We sang in whispers, prayed with an intensity that made our bodies tremble, and studied the Word as if it were fresh water in the desert. To my surprise, the groups began to grow faster than I could have imagined. What began with 5 people soon became 15, then 30. We held meetings in 3 different houses every week. Disillusioned young people, elderly people tired of lifeless rituals, men and women who found in Christ what no religion had offered them, a real relationship, unconditional love, hope that not even death could take away. But with growth came danger. We began to notice unsettling signs. Cars parked near the houses, men pretending to read newspapers while watching us, unfamiliar faces following us through the bazaar, silent calls that were disconnected as soon as we answered. My closest friends warned me, "Nima, they're watching. We should stop for a while." But I knew we couldn't. Every week, new people arrived, thirsty for truth, with eyes hungry for hope. How could I tell them that we were closing our doors out of fear? My own family began to suspect something. My father noticed that I no longer prayed with them and that I avoided certain conversations. One day, he confronted me in the living room, pain etched in his eyes. "Nima, what's happening to you? What have you been doing in secret?" I couldn't lie. My voice trembled, but I told the truth. I had given my life to Christ. The silence that followed was more painful than any scream. My father simply lowered his gaze and left without saying anything more. My mother cried for days. My brothers stopped speaking to me. Still, I remained steadfast, because I had found something undeniable, something greater than comfort or family acceptance. I had found the one who said, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Even with the growing danger, we continued to meet. Each night of prayer was an act of pure faith, each Bible study a silent declaration of courage. We believed, even without words, that Christ was worth any risk. We shared our testimonies with trembling voices, our struggles without masks. We were not a family of blood, but a family of the Spirit, united by something greater than ourselves. But the net that protected us began to tighten. We realized this when one of our brothers was arrested. He was taken to the Ministry of Intelligence and interrogated for hours about our meetings, about me, about other names. He resisted bravely, without revealing anything crucial, but he left shaken, trembling, scarred forever. Before saying goodbye, he only said, "Brothers, they are coming after all of us." From then on, our meetings ceased to be peaceful. Tension hung in the air, heavy as a cloak you can't remove. We prayed more intensely, holding hands, aware that something was about to change. 3 days later, it was late at night. I was alone in my room, reading Isaiah chapter 43, when I heard knocking at the door. It wasn't ordinary knocking. It was authoritative, demanding, impossible to ignore. My heart stopped. My father opened the door, and I soon heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. Before I could react, 5 men in plain clothes, with cold, powerful eyes, burst into the room. One of them pointed a finger at me. "Nima Rahimi, you are under arrest for activities against national security and propaganda against Islam." Everything happened too fast. The handcuffs cut into my skin, and I was dragged out of the room. I saw my mother's face, paralyzed with terror. My father didn't say a word. For the first time, I felt real fear, the kind of fear that makes you doubt everything, even your own faith. They shoved me into a van with no license plates, and as Shiraz disappeared through the window, all that remained was a single promise echoing in my heart. "Do not be afraid, for I am with you." The road seemed endless. I recognized the streets, but now everything seemed menacing, as if the world had turned into an enemy. They didn't blindfold me, and that only increased the terror. Every sign, every light, every face of the men around me was a silent threat. I tried to pray, but the words got stuck in my throat. One of them looked at me with a crooked smile, as if amused by my fear. "So you're the one who's been converting people. Let's see how strong your faith is when you're alone," he said disdainfully. Inside, I cried out, "Lord, don't abandon me. You promised to be with me." The van finally stopped in front of a gray building with no sign. I was pushed out and led down a long, dimly lit corridor. The smell of dampness, sweat, and something indefinable almost made me recoil. I arrived at a tiny, windowless cell. The door slammed shut behind me with a metallic bang that echoed in my mind, sealing the beginning of a time that would test my faith like never before. The silence that followed was almost palpable, dense, like a curtain pressing against my ears, my chest, my entire mind. I sat on the cold floor and hugged my knees, trying to anchor myself. The hours passed without reference. There was no natural light, only a dirty lamp that flickered from time to time, as if mocking the lost time. I tried to remember verses, but my mind was clouded with fear and exhaustion. I thought of the brothers and sisters of the underground church. What if they had also been arrested? I would be putting even more people in danger simply by existing. Guilt began to gnaw at me from the inside, more intensely than the handcuffs that left red marks on my wrists. On the second day, or at least it was the second, because I could no longer measure time, 2 guards took me out of the cell. I was led to an interrogation room, small, cold, with a metal table and 2 chairs. A bright light burned my eyes, making it impossible to see any detail without effort. The interrogator was a middle-aged man with a thick mustache and calculating eyes that seemed to read my soul. He sat calmly in front of me, as if he had all the time in the world. He opened a yellowed folder full of papers and photographs. My heart raced as I recognized the photos. Our meetings, siblings entering and leaving houses, all observed for months, perhaps from the very beginning. He began with a soft, almost gentle voice, but there was a coldness behind it that was more terrifying than any scream. Nima Rahimi, 26 years old, son of a respectable family. Why? You betrayed your faith, your family, your country. I didn't betray anything, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, though trembling. I just found the truth. His expression changed immediately. The kindness evaporated like smoke. The truth? Do you think a foreign book has more truth than the Quran? That a prophet who has already passed away is greater than our prophet? Jesus is not finished, I replied, feeling a courage that seemed to come from outside myself. He conquered eternal separation. He lives. The blow came without warning. My head spun. I tasted the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, a searing pain burning my cheek like molten fire. I tried not to show weakness, not to give them any satisfaction. Let's keep it simple, he said, wiping his hand with a handkerchief as if it were soiled from touching me so much. You give us the names of everyone who attends your meetings, sign a declaration renouncing your faith, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be released in a few years. Maybe I can't do this, I whispered, feeling each word as an internal struggle. You can't, or you won't, he replied, his voice hard as steel. Think carefully, Nima. We have ways to get people talking, ways that will make you regret not cooperating from the start. They took me back to the cell. That night was endless. The fear was so real, it felt like an oppressive physical presence in the tiny room. I wondered, would I really be willing to lose my life for this? Was my faith strong enough to withstand everything that was to come? And then, in the deepest darkness, I remembered something Mariam, one of the sisters from the church, an elderly lady who had survived the revolution, had once told me, holding my wrinkled hands, Nima, when trials come, don't rely on your own strength. Trust that he will sustain you when you can no longer sustain yourself. I began to pray softly, not with elegant or theological words, but only with groans that came from the depths of my soul. Lord, I am afraid. I am not as brave as the martyrs I read about. I don't know if I can bear this, but you know. Help me, please. Help me. The days turned into a brutal routine of interrogations and isolation. Each session surpassed the last. Physical beatings alternated with detailed threats about my family. They showed me documents in which my parents supposedly disowned me publicly, where my siblings demanded the maximum penalty. I didn't know if it was real or fabricated, but it hurt just the same. Each word was a blade plunged into my heart. During one of the interrogations, they brought in someone else. My heart almost stopped. It was Reza, one of the leaders of our prayer group. He was badly injured, one eye closed, swollen, his lip cut, his face bruised. They sat him down in front of me. "Tell him, Reza," the interrogator ordered triumphantly. "Tell him what you told us." Reza lowered his gaze, unable to look at me. I felt my soul shatter. He began to mention names. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt destroyed, as if I had lost a part of myself. But above all, a deep pain pierced me, because of the injustice, because of the suffering they were inflicting on all of us. "It's all right, brother," I said, my voice cracking like glass. "God forgives you. I forgive you." The interrogator laughed cruelly, coldly. "How touching. But forgiveness won't save you here, Nima. Only obedience matters to us." I was led back to my cell, but something was different. The guards were talking amongst themselves in hushed voices, with an urgency I hadn't noticed before. Something was about to happen. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps approaching. It wasn't the usual time for interrogations. The door suddenly opened. 3 men entered, wearing uniforms I had never seen before. One of them was carrying something that made my stomach churn. Thick, black electrical wires connected to an industrial generator. "Stand up," ordered the taller one, his voice cold and emotionless, as if he were dealing with an everyday task. "It's time for you to learn a lesson you'll never forget." They led me down a different corridor. We descended endless stairs, plunging deeper and deeper into the building's bowels. The air grew colder, damper, heavier, and then we arrived at a basement that seemed straight out of my worst nightmares. In the center, a rusty metal structure, an old antenna connected to an industrial generator. My heart raced. I understood what they were planning. Torture with electricity. "Last chance," one of them said, pushing me toward the antenna with rough hands. "Are you going to renounce your faith or not?" I looked at the antenna, then at the men around me. And in that moment, despite the fear that filled me like a river, something inside me refused to break. I had heard stories of other believers tortured in this way. I expected screams, convulsions, unbearable pain, but something happened that none of us expected. The current ran along the antenna and nothing happened. No pain, no contortion. My body remained still, despite the tension and fear that still bound me to the ropes. The 3 men exchanged confused glances, hesitated, and for a moment, I saw the shock etched on their faces. At that moment, I realized something deeper. It wasn't my strength that sustained me. It wasn't human courage. It was Him, the presence of God, sustaining every fiber of my being. I was safe, even there, vulnerable, facing the most absolute danger. My heart raced, but not from fear, from gratitude and a peace that no one could take away. One of the men tried to increase the intensity. The buzzing grew louder, the generator creaking as if it were going to tear my body apart. But again, the shock passed without touching my skin, without breaking my will. The tallest one recoiled, pale, shaking his head. "This shouldn't be possible," he murmured. The other 2 looked at him, unable to comprehend. I closed my eyes, whispering a prayer. "Lord, if my life endures today, may it be to proclaim your faithfulness. May your name be glorified, even in the face of the impossible." The men finally gave up. The tension in the air vanished, replaced by a strange hesitation. Slowly, they released me from the ropes. I fell to my knees on the cold basement floor, feeling every muscle tremble, not from physical pain, but from relief and reverence. My Bible was still there, in front of me, a silent witness that He had never abandoned me. At that moment, I understood something I will never forget. True faith is not the absence of fear, but courage that endures despite it. Even in the deepest darkness, even when death seemed certain, He was with me. I survived that night. But it wasn't just physical survival. It was a spiritual victory, a testament that no human power can overcome that which is sustained by God Himself. And as I stood, my muscles aching and my heart burning, I knew I could no longer remain silent. My voice now carried the weight of truth. Even in the deepest shadows, the light of Christ never goes out. I knew what electricity could do to the human body. I expected pain, screams, convulsions. But what I felt was different. A wave of heat coursed through my body. Yes, but it wasn't pain. It was something I can't fully describe. It was as if an invisible presence was between that energy and me, as if someone were holding me, protecting me. I opened my eyes, confused, and noticed that the men were also paralyzed, bewildered. The generator roared. The basement lights flickered, but I was still whole. And then I saw something that changed everything. My Bible, the one that was at my feet, began to glow. At first I thought it was my imagination, a product of fear or electricity affecting my vision, but no. The light was real, soft, pure, almost liquid. A glow that came from the worn pages, but seemed alive. One of the guards stepped back and shouted, "What is that?" The light grew, illuminating the entire basement, making the previous darkness almost unbearable to look at. It wasn't an ordinary light. It didn't come from lamps or candles. It was different, almost conscious. The men stepped back, covering their eyes. The one near the generator recoiled in fear and released the switch as if it were burning. But the current continued to vibrate, humming in a way that now sounded like music, and I felt something course through my body. It wasn't pain, it was power, an energy that didn't come from the machine, but from somewhere that transcended the physical. It was as if thousands of volts were coursing through me, but instead of hurting me, they strengthened me. I looked at my bound hands. Sparks danced on my skin but didn't burn me. My body should have been burning, my clothes charred, my skin black. But none of that was happening. Instead, a peace took hold of me, an absolute certainty. God was there, in that basement, manifesting his presence in a way impossible to deny. The tallest man, who seemed to be in charge of everything, tried to approach the generator, but as he reached out, a spark jumped from the machine and struck him. He screamed and fell backward. "Turn it off," he ordered his companions, but no one dared to approach. The generator seemed to have a life of its own. It vibrated, trembled, spewed sparks that illuminated the basement like golden rain. And yet, the light of the Bible remained constant, steady. Then something impossible happened. The generator let out a sharp cry. A screech that echoed like muffled thunder began to release black smoke and then exploded in sparks and molten metal. In the silence that followed, I felt my heart slow down and my breathing return to normal. I was whole. In disbelief, I looked at the Bible, still shining softly at my feet, and felt a profound conviction. God was not only with me, he had shown that no power in this world could separate me from his love. Those men retreated, terrified, while I remained standing, bound, but free in spirit. For the first time I felt a strength that did not come from me, but from him who said, "Do not fear, for I am with you." I knew at that moment that nothing could shake the faith of one who truly trusts in the Lord. Flames erupted from the generator, small but real. At that same instant, the three men fell to the ground. It wasn't gradual. They simply collapsed like puppets whose strings had been cut. Their bodies hit the concrete with dull thuds that echoed in the sudden silence. The hum of the generator had ceased. The machine was unusable, smoking and destroyed. The only lights remaining in the basement were the flickering flames of the machine and the soft glow of my Bible. I remained there, still attached to the antenna, trying to process what had just happened. I felt no pain, no burns, no muscle spasms, or any effect of the electricity. It was as if the energy had passed through me without leaving a trace, like water running over a smooth stone. I looked at the fallen men. They were breathing, but unconscious, pale in the dim light, as if life had left them for a moment. "Lord," I whispered, my voice trembling with awe, "what have you done here?" I heard no words, but I felt in my heart a deep, silent certainty, stronger than any sound. I had vowed to be with him until the end, and he had shown that no human power can extinguish his light. Tears began to stream down my face, not of pain or fear, but of gratitude, reverence, and an awe that words could not express. I had read about miracles in the Bible, heard testimonies, but to experience something like this was indescribable. I remained glued to the antenna for what seemed like an endless time, though it was probably only minutes. The Bible's glow gradually faded until it was just an ordinary book again, but I knew that nothing there was ordinary. Finally, I heard hurried footsteps and voices descending the stairs. Other guards had heard the explosion and were coming to investigate. When they entered the basement with flashlights, they froze. 3 of their colleagues lay unconscious on the floor. The destroyed generator was smoking, and I was still alive, whole, strapped to the antenna. "What happened here?" one of them shouted, his voice thick with confusion and fear. "God intervened," I replied, with a calmness that didn't seem like my own. "He showed that no human power can extinguish his light." The guards exchanged uncertain glances, as if they didn't know whether to believe what they were seeing. They approached cautiously, checking on their fallen colleagues. Another untied my ropes with trembling hands, almost as if touching me were dangerous. As soon as I was freed, my legs nearly gave way, not from the electricity, but from the emotional weight of everything I had been through. I clung to the arm of one of the guards. He didn't flinch. There was a silent respect in his eyes, as if something had changed within him as he witnessed it. They took me back to the cell, but this time there was no pushing or violence. The silence was heavy, laden with questions no one dared ask. As soon as I arrived, I collapsed onto the cold floor and just breathed. My body was intact. My clothes had no burn marks, my skin showed no signs of electrocution. But inside me, something had changed forever. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had experienced the presence of God in a way that no human could deny. It was as if nothing had happened, and yet, at the same time, everything had happened. I picked up my Bible, which the guards had dropped in my cell without a word. I pressed it to my chest and wept. I wept for hours, letting out all the fear, all the pent-up tension, all the terror that had accompanied me until that moment. Thank you, Lord, I whispered repeatedly. Thank you for not abandoning me. Thank you for showing your glory even in this dark place. In the days that followed, everything seemed different. The interrogations suddenly ceased. No one questioned me anymore. The guards brought food and water, but avoided looking directly at me, as if they didn't know how to deal with what they had witnessed. I knew something had changed. What happened in the basement had left a mark, a seed planted. A seed of doubt, perhaps, in the minds of those who witnessed or heard about what happened. And perhaps you, who read or hear me, have already wondered, does God still perform miracles today? Perhaps you have cried out for deliverance, for protection, for a visible miracle, and felt only the silence of heaven. Let me tell you something. God's miracles don't always happen the way we expect, but they always happen at the right time, exactly when we need them. Sometimes the miracle is a physical liberation, as it was for me in that basement. But other times, the miracle is invisible. It's the peace in the midst of the storm, the strength to take one more step when it seemed impossible, the hope that insists on remaining even when all seems lost. God didn't save me from the electricity because I was special or more righteous than others. He did it to show that He is faithful to His promises, that His word is true, that no force in this world can separate us from His love. A week after the incident, my cell was opened again. This time only one guard entered, a young man I'd never seen before. He seemed nervous, constantly looking over his shoulder. "You have a visitor," he said quietly. He led me to a small room separate from the interrogation room, and there, seated with his hands clasped and his head bowed, was the man who had flipped the switch, the one who had tried to execute me with electricity. When he looked up, his eyes were red, as if he had been crying. There was something broken in his expression, something that hadn't been there before. "Nima," he said in a hoarse voice, "I need to talk to you." I sat down in front of him, my heart racing, not knowing what to expect. "I haven't been able to sleep since that night," he began, his voice trembling. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that light that comes from your book, and I see you there, without burns, without screaming, and I can't explain it. I've tortured dozens of people. I've seen what electricity does to the human body, but with you, it was different." He paused, searching for the right words, as if trying to understand something that transcended logic. "What power was it that protected you? Nothing that happened that night was natural," he continued. I took a deep breath and calmly replied, "What you saw was the power of the living God, the God who loves humanity so much that He sent His Son to pay the price for our sins. That light, that miracle, was Him showing that nothing can separate us from His love, and that, even in darkness, His presence is real. The same God who can forgive everything you've ever done if you only turn to Him." Bahram's eyes filled with tears. "Even someone like me, after everything I've done," he said, his voice almost choked. "Even someone like you," I replied, recalling Jesus' words. "There is no sin so great that God's grace cannot cover. There is no person so lost that He cannot find." What happened next was something I will never forget. That ruthless man, who had caused so much suffering, completely broke down. He cried like a child, his shoulders trembling with deep sobs that seemed to come from the depths of his being. "I want that forgiveness," she whispered through tears. "I want to know the God who protected you. I want to be free from everything I've done." There, in that small room inside the prison, I led my torturer to Christ. We prayed together, our voices intertwining in confession and supplication. When we finished, there was something different in his face. The hardness had vanished, replaced by a delicate yet real peace. "My name is Bahram," he said, wiping away tears, "and from today on, I am your brother." The days that followed were strange, almost surreal. Bahram began to visit me secretly, always with that hungry look of someone who had found water after years in the desert. He would arrive with questions, so many questions, that sometimes we needed several conversations to find answers. "How can I be sure that God has really forgiven me?" he asked one afternoon, sitting on the floor of my cell, holding a cup of tea. Something strictly forbidden, but he didn't care so much about the rules anymore. "I did terrible things, Nima. Things I'm ashamed to mention," she continued, her voice full of remorse. I leaned forward, holding the Bible between our hands. "Bahram, listen carefully. The Bible says that if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Not just some sins, not just the small ones. All unrighteousness." His eyes filled with tears again. That strong man, trained to hide his emotions, now cried easily whenever we talked about God's grace. It was as if years of hardness were dissipating, layer by layer. "Read this," he said, opening the Gospel of Luke, the story of the prodigal son. He squandered his entire inheritance, lived in complete rebellion, but when he returned home, his father did not reject him. He ran to meet him, embraced him, and restored him. Bahram read silently, his lips moving with the words. When he finished, he closed his eyes. "I am that son," he said. "I wasted my life causing pain, but the Father is still waiting for you with open arms, and you've already taken the first step. You've come home." However, his conversion brought complications. Bahram began to change visibly, and his friends noticed. He no longer participated in certain activities, nor did he laugh at the same crude jokes. One night, worried, he whispered, "Are they watching me? I think they've noticed something has changed about me." My supervisor asked me directly, with a mixture of fear and disbelief, "Are you telling me that you brainwashed him?" And I simply smiled with a peaceful heart, knowing the truth that no human force could erase. It wasn't me, it was God. "What's her name?" I asked carefully, placing my hand over his. "Her name is Layla," Omid replied, his voice heavy with worry and restrained hope. I don't know what else to do. I just want someone to truly intercede for her." I nodded, feeling a mixture of compassion and serenity. "Then let's pray, Omid. Let's ask God to touch your life. He is the same one who was with me that night in the basement, and nothing is impossible for him." We knelt right there on the cold cell floor. He held my hand tightly, and together we spoke to God, asking for healing, strength, and peace for Layla. As we prayed, I felt again that indescribable presence, that same peace that enveloped me when the electricity tried to destroy me. It was as if he were there, listening, enveloping us all with his care. When we stood up, Omid seemed different, his shoulders relaxed, and a glimmer of hope lit up his eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I feel something I've never felt before. Peace." That night, God not only touched Layla's life through our prayer, He began to work in Omid's heart as well. The seed planted in the basement continued to grow, silently but powerfully, reaching even those who had been, until then, only spectators. As he walked away, looking back with gratitude, I realized that the Lord transforms every circumstance into an opportunity. Every fear, every doubt, every moment of helplessness could become a meeting point with His grace. And I, even physically imprisoned, was experiencing a freedom that no prison could take away. The hug we shared was silent, but filled with everything we couldn't put into words. 3 months of fear, prayer, tears, and small victories, now summed up in that simple gesture. We felt God's presence among us in an almost tangible way. As I rose from my cell for the last time, I noticed every detail that, for months, had been nothing but routine or terror. The cold corridors, the echo of footsteps, the guard's gaze, everything now seemed imbued with meaning. Every person who had crossed my path in that place was there for a purpose, and every moment of suffering had been used for something greater than I could comprehend. I was led down the corridor, this time without handcuffs, without suspicious glances. The guards who had previously been inclined towards violence now stepped back respectfully. Some looked away, others smiled shyly. I felt that each step I took was a silent testament to the fact that something divine had happened in that place. Upon reaching the main gate, I felt the wind touch my face, a freedom that went far beyond the absence of physical barriers. My breath mingled with the relief and gratitude that overflowed from my chest. Bahram was beside me, watching with that expression that mixed fear for the future and trust in God. Before crossing the gate, I turned to them, those men who had been torturers and were now part of a story bigger than their own actions. "Never forget," I said, my voice firm but calm. "What you saw here was not my strength. It was the power of God, and He can still touch every life in this prison, and outside of it, if you allow Him." They didn't answer, but something had changed. A silence heavy with reverence filled the space. I stepped outside, feeling that true liberation wasn't just mine. It was theirs too, somehow. And on that cold morning, with the sun timidly rising on the horizon, I understood that God had transformed even the deepest darkness into light and hope. And so, even leaving that place, I carried with me more than life. I carried living faith, testimony, and the certainty that, wherever we are, nothing can separate us from His love. The man who had previously tortured me now called me brother. "God has a plan for you, Bahram. Trust in Him, as I had to trust," he said, and I felt the weight of those words in my heart. The preparation for my release was surprisingly quick. Returning my belongings, they also gave me my Bible, forever marked by what I had lived through. I held it tightly, remembering the light that emanated from it in that basement, the light of God that guided me in the deepest darkness. Before leaving, I asked to see all those who had turned to Christ during my captivity. It was risky, but the officers, perhaps relieved to be rid of me, allowed it. We gathered in a small room. Bahram, Omid, the mustachioed interrogator, and other guards who had overheard our conversations. "Brothers and sisters," I said, looking at each face, "what began here cannot end when I am gone. You are the church now, in this place. Take care of one another. Pray together when you can, and when the time comes, share what you have learned." We prayed together, our voices mingling in the language of faith. When we finished, tears streamed down everyone's faces, including mine. Aram escorted me to the main door. Before I left, he placed something in my hand, a small cross, carved by himself from wood. "So that you may remember," he said, "even in the darkest places, the light of Christ can shine, and none of us are beyond His reach." I left that prison on a cold winter morning, breathing air that felt new, full of freedom. I didn't leave the same way I went in. I went in as a prisoner, full of fear. I left as a living witness to God's unwavering faithfulness. The morning sun blinded me, and for a few seconds I just stood there, absorbing every sensation I had forgotten. The warmth of the sun on my skin, the sounds of life outside. Shiraz was before me, the same city, but everything seemed different. The bustling streets, the aromas of the market, the smell of fresh bread. Everything seemed more intense, more precious, as if pain had polished every detail of reality. I had nowhere to go. My family had made it clear that I was no longer welcome. The brothers and sisters of the underground church were scattered, some probably fleeing the city. I was free, but alone. Wandering aimlessly, I passed the market where, years before, a man had given me the Gospel of John. I thought of him, if he was still alive, if he would ever see the fruits of that simple act of obedience. Something caught my attention. People were looking at me differently. There was no hostility, but curiosity and even respect. Whispers arose as I passed by. My story had escaped those walls, and somehow, the whole city was beginning to hear about what God had done inside that prison. Somehow, as night fell, someone called my name. I turned around and found an older man, whom I didn't recognize at first. He approached cautiously, looking around as if to make sure no one was watching us. "Nima Rajimi," he said softly. "I am Reza's uncle. He asked me to find her and guide her." My heart raced. "Pray," he instructed. "Okay, but where is he?" "Safe, out of town. But before leaving, he arranged something for you." He handed me a small piece of paper with an address. "Go there tonight. There are people waiting for you." I followed the address to a house on the outskirts of Shiraz. Modest, but well kept, it seemed ordinary at first glance. But something in the air told me it wouldn't be just a visit. I knocked on the door, and when it opened, I was greeted by familiar faces and new ones, brothers and sisters of the underground church whom I thought I would never see again. Hugs, tears, and praises to God filled the room. There were about 20 people, and in the midst of them all, Reza awaited me, her eyes full of life despite the marks of suffering. "Brother," he said, hugging me tightly, "we thought we almost lost you." "But God had other plans," I replied. feeling the weight and grace of everything we had experienced. That night, I shared my full testimony for the first time. I spoke about the basement, the antenna that failed, the electricity that didn't burn me, the Bible that shone like a light in the darkness. I spoke about Bahram and the other guards who found Christ in the most unlikely place. When I finished, silence fell. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but a sacred one, as if everyone recognized that we had touched something greater than ourselves. It was Reza who finally broke the silence. Nima, your testimony is not just yours. It is for everyone who faces fear, for everyone who doubts whether God is truly with them in their battles. But I need to share this how. I can't stay in Iran. They already released me once, but if I keep preaching, they'll come after me, I replied, with fear and hope mixed together. An elderly woman, affectionately called Mother Shiran, leaned forward. Then you need to leave. Take this testimony beyond these borders. There are persecuted brothers and sisters all over the world who need to hear that God still performs miracles. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. My brothers, at great personal risk, organized my departure from Iran. It wasn't simple or quick. There were dangerous moments, checkpoints I had to cross with falsified documents, and night journeys hidden in trucks. But finally, I arrived in Turkey. When I set foot on Turkish soil on a cold night, I fell to my knees and wept. They weren't tears of sadness, but of relief, gratitude, and a strange mixture of pain for everything I was leaving behind. Today I live in Istanbul. I work with an organization that helps Iranian refugees, many of them Christians who also had to flee. I share my testimony whenever I can in small churches, discreet meetings, conversations in coffee shops. And what impresses me most, I constantly receive messages of support and affection, reminding me that the work God began doesn't end when we leave a place. It just continues wherever we are. News from Iran reached me recently. Bahram quit his job, as he had promised, and now leads a small group of believers in another city. Omid also left the intelligence service and is studying to become a teacher. Chabad, the mustachioed interrogator, moved to the north of the country and began sharing his faith with his family. The church that was born in that prison continues to grow, operating in the shadows, but radiating a light that no one can extinguish. I learned something profound from all of this. God doesn't waste suffering. Every tear, every night of fear, every moment of doubt, He transforms it into something eternal. My imprisonment wasn't an accident or a failure of divine protection. It was part of a heavenly plan to reach people who otherwise would never have heard the gospel. If you are facing difficulties right now, I want you to know, God is with you in the flames. He doesn't always deliver us from the fire, but He walks with us through it. And when you come out on the other side, you will have a story that only suffering can write, a testimony that only trials can forge. I have seen dictators fall and regimes change, but the light of Christ remains unshaken. They have tried to extinguish it with violence, laws, prisons, torture, but each attempt only makes it multiply. Because this light does not depend on our strength or circumstances. It comes from the one who conquered death 2,000 years ago and continues to conquer darkness. Many people ask me if I have forgiven my torturers. The answer is simple. How could I not forgive if Christ forgave me first? Bahram is not only my brother in faith, he is a living reminder that no one is beyond the reach of grace. While you listen to this, thousands of brothers and sisters around the world are suffering for Christ, in Iran, in China, in North Korea, in places where following Jesus can cost everything. Pray for them. Remember, if one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. And if you are in the midst of your own battle, if you feel crushed by the forces against you, know this. The same electricity that tried to destroy me became a testament to God's power. Your struggles, too, can become platforms for witnessing. Your pain can become the pulpit of God's glory. This is the marvelous paradox of the gospel. In our weaknesses, He shows Himself strong. In our darkness, He shines more brightly. No power on earth can extinguish this light. Before I conclude, I want to ask 3 things of you. Pray now for a persecuted believer you don't know, but whom God knows. Share this testimony with someone who is facing their own trial of faith, and write in the comments what area of your life you need to remember that God walks with you through the fire. May this testimony end here, but may it also be the beginning of something new in your faith.